Hello YouTube and welcome back all once again to another Rage video where tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are doing another CureCusArts video. This one is actually slightly older and subsequently a little bit shorter than the ones we've done before. It's just under 6 minutes in length, but this one opens an entire can of problems. It's called Is War Over? A Paradox Explained. And considering how long this video might possibly get as in consequence, I think it's better for everyone if we just kind of like got started. So let's do it. So if you guys want to check out the original video for yourselves, links will all be in the description down below. Let's begin. Is war over? In 3, 2, 1, and...
Violence and war. The insane brutality of ISIS continues. The Russians are invading Ukraine, and the Palestinians and Israelis continue.
I actually do remember when that happened. It happened like, I think it was like mid-February, just over 7 years ago when this started to happen. And it's kind of strange that it happened and then about a year or so later, then everybody just kind of stopped talking about it. Even though those who suffered, obviously, would probably say there's still a lot more going on. And this was only 7 years ago when this happened, including the Syrian civil war was still ongoing, and ISIS was still this was just a year before the Paris terrorist attacks as well. It's fascinating. Just not even 10 years ago. I mean, 10 years ago we had the deaths of Colonel Gaddafi and Osama bin Laden. Think about that, and that was only 10 years ago as well.
To slug it out. Does that make you feel gloomy? Well, don't, because if you look at the numbers, war actually seems to be going out of fashion, while the global population is at an all-time high. It seems that we live in the most peaceful period in human history. How is this possible? As of September 2014, there were 4 conflicts going on in the world that had caused at least 10,000 people to die since January 2013, 9 conflicts that killed more than 1,000 people, and 13 that killed more than 100 since January 2013. Not really peaceful, but consider this. Of all the conflicts going on, none is an active war between countries. They are either civil wars or local conflicts. Although civil wars are terrible and cause huge suffering, their impact is usually way smaller than a war between nations or empires. When 2 nations engage in war, they can mobilize much bigger forces, have access to all of the state's resources and logistics, and almost to all of the population. So why have we transitioned from wars between nation-states to civil wars? A lot of it is to do with colonialism and the Cold War. When the Cold War ended, a major driver of armed conflict vanished too. But the breakup of the communist dictatorships revealed new or old tensions and brought new conflicts in the now freed states, which often resulted in civil war. Much more importantly, in 1945, nearly all of Africa, much of Asia, and parts of Latin America were under colonial rule. By 1990, all but a few islands were independent. But wait, couldn't you argue that what today's multinational corporations are doing in the Third World is just as bad as colonialism? Let's look at Congo. It was established as a colony in 1885 by the Belgian king, an area 80 times the size of Belgium. Violence committed against the indigenous Congolese and the ruthless system of economic exploitation had killed about half of the population by 1908. About 10 million Congolese were executed or starved to death. Millions were mutilated and traumatized. The economic exploitation of the Congo remained the top priority, and forced labor never really ceased completely until the end of Belgian rule in 1960, which is not really that long ago. So no, colonialism was much worse than vulture capitalism is today, and it ended just 2 generations ago. Most of the conflicts that are going on right now are in areas that 60 years ago were under foreign control. But things are getting better. Until 1989, victory for one side in a civil war was common, while nowadays victories are much rarer. At the same time, negotiated endings have jumped from 10% to almost 40%. What about the rest of the world? Why have nation-states stopped attacking each other? There are 4 major reasons. 1. Democratization. The steady development from autocracy to democracy. Democracies hardly ever fight each other. Of all the state-against-state wars fought since 1900, only a minority were fought between democracies. 2. Globalization. War is just not as effective at achieving economic goals as it used to be. Today, it's almost always cheaper to buy resources on the global market than to seize them by force. People from other nations are more valuable to us alive than dead, which overall is a pretty new concept. 3. War is so 20th century. Until World War I, warfare was seen as an inevitable part of the human experience and as a valuable tool which you could use to achieve goals when diplomacy hit a brick wall. Today we have rules that declare acts of aggression illegal and stipulate that armed force is only justified in self-defense or with the authority of the UN Security Council. These rules are still broken, but today it's harder to do so without sparking opposition and disapproval. Also, we have an international court for war crimes in The Hague, and that's a very recent innovation. 4. Borders are mostly fixed now. After World War II, territorial wars generally stopped when most countries pledged to accept international borders and respect other nations' autonomy. But is all of this just an anomaly, or are we on the road to lasting peace? Truth is, we don't know yet. We need a big enough sample to rule out the historical average, which is about 1 or 2 big wars per century. We just haven't had enough time since World War II to rule out the possibility that war is not going away. If we don't have one major war in the next 75 years, we can be really confident that humanity is changing. So, you see, war might be over. Yes, there are nasty conflicts going on in many places, but overall, things are getting better, and we can make them even better by speaking up for peace and democracy.
Okay, let's read through this very quickly. Okay, war sucks, but the world isn't as bad as we all thought. How come we didn't know that? Is the media to blame? Bad stuff makes for good news headlines, and it always has done. But actually, the world is becoming a better place, even if it may not feel that way. Maybe there is hope for us as a species. First thing I kind of want to say in regards to this is that in Britain, one of the great aspects you can spot to how many of the old-fashioned, very early 20th century believing in, the royal family and the colonialization of nations such as India and Burma, they haven't really stopped as far as the attitudes of the newspapers goes, because there are 3 main notorious newspapers in British circulation. They are the Daily Mail, the Daily Express, and the Sun newspaper. I'm going to talk about I know this sounds like I'm a bit of a strange point to start talking about, but I'm going to state this point first. And let's start talking about the Sun newspaper first. The Sun newspaper, for those who have never heard of it, is a tabloid newspaper. The reason why, and I think it's something to do with the way printed media is sort of circulated, especially in the form of newspapers, is that tabloid newspapers are presented by having a red border, whilst non-tabloid papers, ones that just deal with news and all the rest of it, will basically just have either black bold lettering on the tops, just sort of to propose that they are, their logos, and you can see exactly who they are. But anyway, the Sun newspaper, like tabloids, they deal with showbiz, gossip, rumours, and stuff that is generally of no real importance or relevancy or interest to anybody but except very, very simple people. The Sun newspaper is one of those papers that would not care either way if you bought it or not, because back in the day they had what they used to call page 3 girls, which were basically pictures of girls with, let's call them, abnormally large chests, all bare for the world to see. Because the idea is that back in the day is that the Sun would be sort of like a working man's newspaper for, like, let's say a builder or perhaps a construction worker, for example. So when he's away and, you know, doing his work and all that, then the first thing he'll want to see is a nice pair of tits. That was the attitude that seemingly the Sun newspaper had towards its readers, that all you have to do is just show them a pair of boobs and all of a sudden they'll keep them randy enough and probably less likely to read stuff like the Daily Mirror or the Eye or the Guardian or the Independent newspaper or stuff like that. It's really... And also the Sun newspaper has also gone out of its way to make pretty less than flattering comments towards men who have mental breakdowns, towards people who've been harassed for years. In particular, there's one sort of story in recent times that Harry and Meghan have been relieved from royal duties and stripped of their titles. And it's been nothing out of the common because obviously in very slow news days such as this, because of COVID-19, they decide to print all these stories that have they no shame, have they no respect, or how dare they talk to this. Or one in particular that technically came from the Daily Mirror is that camera shy Meghan reveals to all the world that they're having a second baby. Although I would rather have that title replaced by saying something like media and journal whores exploit one story, stretch it to all proportions, and basically steal the main image. Because that image of Harry and Meghan sitting under a tree went across pretty much all major publications, including Twitter, Facebook, all across social media for that matter. There have been plenty of stories like that, and there are plenty of stories since. Also, the Sun newspaper more notoriously blamed, I say blamed because this did happen, that during the Hillsborough disaster, that various some members of Liverpool decided to urinate and defecate and steal from the victims who died. So, for the most part, the Sun newspaper is almost virtually a taboo and almost a forbidden thing to own in Merseyside, Baconhead, Everton. I like to imagine if you even went as far as, let's say, Bradford or Rochdale with a copy of the Sun newspaper, they would throw you halfway down the country to make sure that you're not welcome with that sort of rubbish. And in case you want to know a little bit more, because I don't have time to go into that here, you might want to end up looking up research about the Hillsborough disaster yourself. But let's move on, because the Daily Express and the Daily Mirror are they're kind of very, very similar, but also a little bit different from the other. The Daily Mail, they speak very high and very royally, but they are, unfortunately, a very right-wing newspaper. They support what is known in Britain as the Conservative Party, which is very right-wing, very anti-Labour, and they are very heavily against unions. They are very heavily against, women's rights. It took them. They are what many people like to call, they run an economic government, not a people government. They put economics, they put business, they put all that sort of stuff before its very people. In fact, it was only I still have terrors about this, about one woman whose name is Therese Coffey, who works for the I think she's meant to be works for DWP, the Department for Works and Pensions, asking, can you make the minimum wage something like $3.36 an hour? And she said this with all the genuineness and all of the sincerity of somebody who wants to keep poor people poor. And then, of course, you got women like Priti Patel, who has a very spiteful and a very hurtful view towards migrants. And the Daily Mail speaks of them as though they were royalty. That's the sort of people that are in a Conservative government, aside from the world's biggest gambler in Boris Johnson, our current Prime Minister. There have been books written about Johnson already, labelling him as a gambler. And again, while I don't have time to go over this now, for those who know will instantly catch on, especially if you've been a keen observer of the news from 2020 to this day in 2021. The Daily Express, however, are, if anything, are worse, but in a far more malicious sort of sense. If the Mail speak about themselves as though they were royalty, then the Express speak of themselves as those above the law, because they have a very spiteful and a very sinister attitude towards people. Xenophobia and unintentional racism is absolutely nothing new if you ever read or even just see the front of the Daily Express. I mean, I'm going to go onto their website right now and I'm going to pull out a headline because, in fact, I'll tell you what, I'm going to do that as well. I'm going to pull up one for the Daily Mail. Let's see, news headlines, Daily Mail. Royal fury at Harry and Meghan's horrible, disrespectful parting shot. Palace shock at couple's churlish insult after losing patronages. As if it's royalty, as it's revealed how Queen told her grandson, "You work for the monarchy doesn't work for you." On one hand, I would say absolutely that they speak of this as though you have absolutely no say whatsoever just because you were born into this. But Harry was not. He was born, yes, but not into this. And also, and you know who gave birth to Prince Harry? A woman called, famously regarded as Princess Diana. And none of had a field day when talking about her. Trust me, again, I don't have time to explain stuff like that, but that some of the things they said about that is absolutely vile as well. And the main headline is, "Have they no respect?" So they come across the air as just as if, Harry and Meghan, happily married, and they are free to do as they wish. And I'd say it's very brave and very adamant of them to decide to stand down from royal service, saying that we don't want to be a part of this anymore, and we're going to back out. And now it's this kind of attitude that the Mail, I'd say, is trying to bully its readers, whomever they may be, to turn on people. But unfortunately, you see, a lot of people are a lot smarter than this to begin to think about just saying that to encourage this mob of hate towards these two people. If Britain or Airstrip One ever decide to have a hate week, it probably would include stuff like this, but it's very, very unlikely. People have got, they wouldn't do that. Similarly, let's take a look at the Daily Express's headline as well. I just saw, I might put up a slightly different one because just to sort of for a little bit more variety. Let's see. Well, I may as well speak about this one because it displays kind of their sense of, their xenophobia, as I mentioned before. Brexit outrage. French politician, they don't give his name, demanded UK get out of Europe before you wreck it. That's actually their words, trust me. They don't tell us who this politician's name is, and he's making these very, very wild and very untrue remarks, because I don't think any politician to any degree is going to be taken at all seriously by saying stuff like "get out of Europe before you wreck it." The Express trying to paint this very patriotic and very soppy image that because we've left the European Union, that we should be, we should feel sad for the UK and we should feel spiteful towards the rest of Europe. That's what the Express wants to get out of us. They want us to fuel us with complete and utter spite towards our European brothers and cousins and sisters. Now, the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because, in fact, I'll tell you what, I'll pull up the Sun newspaper as well, just to, I want to, do this as well, just to, let's see, Oh yes, well we'll do another one based on Harry and Meghan. Air him out. Yeah. Also, they use like really terrible puns in this as well. Service is universal. Jibe was taken out of context, says Harry's army pal. Prince Harry and Meghan's parting shot at the Queen has been taken out of context, according to an army friend of the Duke. The couple yesterday hit. Well, there's not much point in going out over the rest of it. Is that unless this is proven to be absolutely true, then we can only just put it about saying that this is spread for malicious gossiping purposes. Whether or not it's to dirty the image of Harry and Meghan so far, because it's not like the Sun has not done that before. But the point I kind of like why I wanted to bring all of this up in the first place is kind of like what I'm going to say next. The reason why I honestly suspect why we would not go to war right now, despite how many millions of pounds we put into defence, the Navy, the Army, the RAF, but the reason why I don't think we would ever go back into war is because the world is as bad enough as a place as it is without war. Why exactly are we going to attempt to make things worse? Now, there are several glaring problems, I should say, with that. Because, for one, we don't have to be... No real nation has to be the one that initiates the conflict. But simply because one nation has to... Or it could even be a certain group of people, compared to the assassination of Franz Ferdinand about when World War I began. At some point, someone is going to have to cause such a racket and claim they did it for the liberation of their people. Then there's going to be a very coloured attitude towards said people. If something very... For example, if the Queen was assassinated by a third world nation, then they'll be wondering, what on earth did you do that for? And there would certainly be a lot of talk about of what would be a very, very serious incident, a very serious terrorist attack. Well, even though I'm not in support of the royal family itself, it's something that a lot of people are interested in and can cause goodness knows what kinds of conflicts and troubles. But again, what exactly is this going to prove because one, it's expensive to go to war as well, because we won't just be sending over one battleship and one frigate or one submarine. But then again, if we decided to attack this other nation because of what they did to us, then other nations, neighbouring nations as well, that because they know if the British, let's say if the British marched into, let's say, Namibia, and they were going to exact revenge or conflict or whatever motivation there is going to be, because I'm pretty sure it would have to be a lot more than just the Queen being assassinated to stir up a war. But then again, other nations would probably more African nations would step into the fray and say, hey, we don't particularly like the idea of attacking of Namibia, possibly killing thousands of people for what only 2 people or 3 did to one person. They'll see that because they know if the British go into Africa, then it's going to be a massacre. But then again, to get to Namibia, because Namibia is quite south of the African continent, then at best the British would have to travel some 7,000 miles down south just to get to Namibia. But then again, it would be enough for like nations like Senegal and Zimbabwe, Botswana, Kenya, Uganda. There could be South Africa. There could be plenty of nations that would rally together to give what I can only describe as the British as a very, very insincere and very, very unfriendly welcome. And by the time that happens, then even more incidents could happen. Like the British could launch even more troops into Africa and literally swarm, because that's sort of like the point I'm trying to make is that what this is going to happen is that if, let's say, Namibia was defeated and the entire country was completely on its knees, what happens then? Do we just decide to leave, or do we decide to, you know, I don't know, what on earth would you do? Would you just sort of like try to take over it and then make sort of like a beginning of another like empire or something like that? What exactly do you do when you've sorted an international dispute on such a scale as that? But then again, I think honest to God, ladies and gentlemen, like I said earlier, is that what point is there really of international conflict? Because one, it would devastate economies, it would ruin people's lives, apart from the torture, the physical suffering, and goodness knows what other kinds of atrocities that people would suffer under. And all you have to do, remember, ladies and gentlemen, is remember exactly by reading books about history, and stuff like For Whom the Bell Tolls, Homage to Catalonia, and Frank's Diary, among thousands of others, not only to understand exactly what war entails, but who are the casualties of what, who are the losers of war, because there are no winners when it comes to war, not in the long run. Because you could definitely say that a crowded bomb in a public city would cause far more suffering than about 24 political persecutions. But then again, many people will be sitting back going, what exactly was the point of all this? What is really the point of going to war in the first place? But then again, I'm going to sort of like end this video by saying that why do people go to war in the first place? Because I feel like I'm sufficiently inadequate to present a coherent or a very simple answer, because this isn't a simple answer. It's a scale model of war to explain exactly what war is all about. If I was to talk about it at all in any detail, I'd probably have to make the video almost 3 hours long to do something like that, and I can't do that sort of thing. It's just, what if I finish it and come out the other end and find out that I'm completely wrong? There's always that, but maybe it should be one of those things I should at least try myself to do, because having to like think of this stuff on the fly is a little bit hard, because I think there's more than enough statements to say that they're probably outdated and out-fashioned, pretty much like the Express or the Mail or the Sun. They're outdated and they only aspire to a generation that is far more right-wing than probably that of the newer generation. But then again, won't the newer generation be more right-wing when they get older anyway? But how much right-winger? And what... I'm going to end this right now, ladies and gentlemen, because I think I've got some work to do. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this reaction video tonight, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope so of you guys again in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye for now.